بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى خصوصا على سيد الرسل وخاتم الأنبياء وعلى آله الأزكياء وأصحابه الأتقياء أما بعد. The great companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, Anas bin Malik radiyallahu anh, inherited or received certain servants as a portion from the spoils of war. Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu anh was the general, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened the lands at his hands. So from there, the spoils of war were then brought back to Medina Munawwara, and as instructed by Allah in His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, were distributed among the Muslims. Anas radiyallahu anh received a particular slave who was a very pious and righteous man, who spent his day worshiping and his night also in worship. Great intelligence, someone that had a lot of greatness ahead of him, and Anas radiallahu anh saw it. So he put him into a contract and said, if you are able to pay off this amount, you can be free. The benefit here would be the one that would now be given a sum. And secondly, it would also push the people who were looking for their freedom to force their way into the workplace and into the world. So once they did give their freedom, they can continue moving forward. This is a system of mukataba. So he was able to pay off the amount and therefore became free. As he became free, he then had a desire to get married. And there was a young lady who was under the service and ownership of Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu by the name Hafsa. He said to her that I'm interested in marrying you. He sought permission from Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu. And this man, Sirin, married this lady Hafsa. The two of them lived a very beautiful life in Medina Munawwara. However, later they relocated to Basra. And in Basra, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed them with multiple children. From them was a great giant and tabi'i by the name of Sayyidina Muhammad ibn Sirin rahimahullah ta'ala. He was a pillar of his time, a powerhouse of knowledge. The tarbiyah that this household provided for the kids was very special because not only was their son a pious man, but if you were to read the works on biographies, you will find that in the names of the tabaqat of the ulama, along with Muhammad ibn Sirin, his sister's name is there as well. And they say regarding her, last night as I was preparing for today's talk, I was reading the biography of Ibn Sirin, and I kept going into his sister's biography because the two are very similar. And every time I opened a book and read about his sister, one thing they agreed on was that there was no one that could match her in piety. That she was never seen leaving her house. She dedicated her entire life to ibadah. On one side, this is the sister. On the other side, the brother is now in the circles of the muhaddithun. And he is now someone that is very trustworthy. And what he was known for was his dhabt, that when he would narrate something, he was very particular about the language that was being used when narrating. Now, the interesting thing is, Ibn Sirin was a tabi'i. He studied from over 30 companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and among them were great giants. Down the road from him, there was another great scholar who was in the same city at the same time, and it was just a few years age gap between the two. Ibn Sirin, according to most scholars, was born during the end of the Khilaf of Uthman radiallahu anhu. Imam Dhahabi does quote a position stating that he was born at the end of the Khilaf of Umar radiallahu anhu, but then he quotes the second narration saying that there is another statement, even though the first is narrated by his son Anas. The second one is that he was not born in the Khilaf of Umar, rather he was born towards the end of the Khilaf of Sayyidina Uthman ibn Affan. And majority of the muhaddithun gave preference to the second position. So in age, he was probably a little younger than Hassan al-Basri, who was the other powerhouse of Basra. Now try to picture this in your mind. On one side of the town, you have Muhammad ibn Sirin, right? And on the other side of the town, you have Hassan al-Basri. Hassan al-Basri is the top student of Ali radiallahu anh, and Ibn Sirin is the top student of Sayyidina Anas bin Malik radiallahu anh. Both of these great companions of Rasulullah, and in their own respect, like children to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So you find that people were always comparing the two, that who is more knowledgeable, who is more righteous. So among the muhaddithun, they would have this discussion. Some of them would say that when it came to understanding the meaning, the ma'na of the narration, it was Hassan al-Basri. But when it came to the alfaz of the narrations, the actual words used in every narration, he took a very apparent approach, not like a dhahiri, but he would try to stick to the apparent of the riwayah, more in line with what we may consider as the written tradition scholars. And therefore, that was a unique thing to him. Someone once came to Ibn Sirin. قال معمر جاء رجل إلى ابن سيرين. Ma'mar says a person came to Ibn Sirin فقال رأيت كأن حمامة التقمت لؤلؤة. I saw as if a bird had swallowed a pearl. By the way, Ibn Sirin was very good at dreams. So this person comes to Muhammad ibn Sirin with a dream. I saw a dream that a bird swallowed a pearl. فخرجت منها أعظم ما كانت. But then it spat the pearl out, and when it came out, the pearl was much larger than when the bird originally swallowed it. ورأيت حمامة أخرى, and I saw a second bird. التقمت لؤلؤة, that had also swallowed a pearl. فخرجت أصغر مما دخلت, and when it spat it out, this pearl was actually smaller. ورأيت أخرى التقمت لؤلؤة, I saw a third bird that swallowed a pearl, and when it spat it out, فخرجت كما دخلت, it was the same. So Ibn Sirin, now this child in dream interpretation, he says, أما الأولى فذاك الحسن يعني البصري. As for the first bird that swallowed a pearl and spat out greater than what it took in, this is the example of my dear friend Hassan al-Basri. يسمع الحديث فيجوده بمنطقه ويصل فيه من مواعظه. That he is able to take something that he knows knowledge and go deep into it and present it in a much profound way, like he's able to provide so much from one narration. وَأَمَّا الَّتِي صَغُرَتْ فَأَنَا. As for the one that took knowledge and gave it out in a smaller form, that's me. Unfortunately, I have shortchanged you guys. It's his, humbleness and the way he saw himself. As for the third one, Qatada, فَقَتَادَ. Then this is Qatada bin Di'ama as-Sadusi. That this is another scholar. Inshallah, one day we'll try to cover his biography as well, one of the great giants. Ibn Sirin was known for two things. One is his dedication to knowledge, and he was very particular because he lived at a time where there was a lot of bid'ah happening. There were, people who were trying to innovate in the deen. One particular person says that I used to sit with Ibn Sirin, then I left Ibn Sirin and started sitting in the gatherings of scholars who were coming up with these new progressive ideas. I love this new Islam that was in place. So I started going to those gatherings and I was tired of Ibn Sirin. And then I saw a dream of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam's body being carried for burial. So when he woke up, he went to Ibn Sirin and said to him, I saw this dream. And Ibn Sirin responded back to him by saying, this is you leaving our gatherings and going to the gatherings of the people of bid'ah. They are taking the Prophet's sunnah to the graveyard. They're trying to end this. Stop gatherings and come back to the gatherings of the Salaf, of these scholars who have actually studied with the Sahaba and have benefited from them. When it came to his worship, he was unparalleled. Long nights of prayer, unmatched. Recitation of the Quran with his heart really deeply connected. But as we see with all of these scholars, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests them. And Muhammad ibn Sirin was also tested by Allah. However, before I go to that test of his, I wanted to spend a few moments speaking about his personality. Imam Dhahabi rahimahullah ta'ala, while describing the personality of Ibn Sirin, he says, that he was a very jocular, happy person. He actually quotes a narration of someone saying that if you went to Ibn Sirin's gathering, you would come out of there crying out of laughter. That he would really bawl people out. And then on the other side of the road, if you went to Hassan al-Basri's gathering, you would come out of there crying out of grief and huzn, because he would take you for a tour to the graveyard, in his words. And you would see that when it came to the audiences that attended these gatherings, Hassan al-Basri had a different type of student, someone that was very sanjida and sincere and very committed and mature in their own way. And in Ibn Sirin's place, everyone was there. Like everyone from the market showed up. Everyone wanted to study hadith when it came to Ibn Sirin. It was because of his personality. He was a very likable, very fun, enjoyable person. He would always make everyone laugh. He would go to the markets and do dhikr of Allah, and everyone would see him. He would go to the markets and say salam to people. He would go smile at people and wave at people. And this is a personality trait that made him so beloved to everyone. He was also known for dream interpretation, and I don't think there's much to be debated on the issue. Most scholars agree that he was quite the master. Today, you'll find a book dedicated to him on dream interpretations. It's probably the book that everyone reads. It's an interesting book because it's full of all sorts of interpretations and, dreams. It seems as if majority of the scholars agree the attribution of this book to Ibn Sirin is not correct. Now, they don't have any definitive proof to say the attribution is wrong, to be very clear here. What they're basing this off of is when you read the earlier biographical works and there is a mention of Ibn Sirin, there's no mention of this book. Whether you read the works of Ibn Kathir, whether you read the works of Al-Dhahabi, they all agree he was a master in dream interpretation. Imam Dhahabi has a whole list of dreams and he has all the interpretations. It's a very fun read. It's enjoyable, fascinating. But he makes zero references to this tafsir al-ahlam, this tafsir or this ta'bir or this book on dream interpretation. Wallahu a'lam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Now let's go to the challenge of Ibn Sirin. Unfortunately, he found himself in prison. And he was actually imprisoned for an extended period. Now, if I were to ask you, why do you think this tabi'i was imprisoned, what would you say? Yes. He was falsely accused. I like that. What else? Just make up something. It doesn't need to be technical. The king doesn't like him. Politics. He maybe interpreted some dream in a wild way and people didn't like that. Like, throw this guy in prison. His story is different. And I kid you not, when I read this story of Ibn Sirin, it almost made me cry because I realized that the struggle that he went through is a struggle that most of you have probably gone through. And unfortunately, the circumstances that he found himself in led him to no other place but prison. He was a business person. He had a big shipment. He ordered zayt, oil. He purchased it from a particular lady. The quantity he ordered, he went over the top. He made a very big order. He ordered a 40,000 dirham container of oil. He was in business. He wanted to make money. When the product came and he was examining it, he found a dead rat. Now he was confused. He was, conflicted. What do I do? On one side, a legal argument can be made that the oil is pure. He was very familiar with it. He is a scholar, right? Imam Muslim rahmatullahi alayhi quotes him in the Muqaddimah, that be mindful of who you take your deen from. Al-isnadu min ad-deen. He's a giant. He knows the deen. But spiritually speaking, he was conflicted because he wasn't sure what to do now. Should I go ahead and sell it? If I sell it, maybe haram product goes into the market, thousands of Muslims eat from it. I'm accountable in front of Allah on the Day of Judgment for 100,000 people for this 40,000 dirham worth of oil. His conclusion was that he could not sell this product and he was going to spill it. And he spilled all the oil and was now in debt for 40,000 dirham to this lady. A bad business deal. The lady took him to court, and the Amir said, pay up. He was broke. So then the Amir sentenced him to prison. And this great muhaddith and scholar therefore entered into prison. His fellow prisoners were ashamed to see their sheikh walking with them. The guards would cry when they would see him, because he was the scholar, the muhaddith, the mufassir, the mu'abbir. The prisoner would say to him, the guard would say to him, that sheikh, why don't you go home at night? You're old. Go sleep with your family. You can come back here during the day if you'd like, but go home. And his response would be that I did wrong to a lady, and until my debt isn't paid off, I'm not going anywhere. It's her haqq that I sit here, and I won't betray her. This is my fault. He used to hold himself accountable. He would say that the years that I spent in prison were a result of a sin that I committed. He was once talking to someone, and there was a person that came in front of him, and he said, "Ya muflis." He referred to that person as a poor man. And he said, maybe this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put me where I am. That my deeds were maybe washed out because of my words that I said to another Muslim. Holding himself accountable. We know very well that this was just life. But these people were reflective and they were deep. When Anas bin Malik radiallahu anh passed away, in his wasiyah he wrote, this particular reference is from Suwar min Hayat al-Tabi'in. When Anas radiallahu anh passed away, he wrote in his wasiyah that my janazah be led by Muhammad ibn Sirin. So they came to Sirin and they said that the great Sahabi of the Prophet of Allah passed away and he requested you lead the janazah. He said, I won't leave prison until that lady gives me permission. If she gives me permission, then I will go. Otherwise, I'm not going anywhere. I did her wrong. She granted him permission. He went and prayed, led the janazah, and came back to prison. He remained in prison until someone actually said, you know what, enough is enough. You know what, I'm going to cover this debt. Get this scholar out of here. This is just wrong. Like, what? This is wrong. This man is a giant. He's a fountain of ilm. Get him out. I will take care of the debt. And it was at that point that Ibn Sirin gave that person so much dua, because otherwise there was no way out for him from there. He made a lot of dua for this person. He continued to live a beautiful life serving the deen. And when he passed away on his deathbed, the advice he gave to his children, وَوَصَّى بِهَا إِبْرَاهِيمُ بَنِيهِ وَيَعْقُوبُ يَا بَنِيَّ إِنَّ اللَّهَ اصْطَفَى لَكُمُ الدِّينَ. These were his last advices to his family members. That just as Ibrahim alayhi salam gave this advice to his children before he passed away, do not die unless you are Muslim. Today I give you that same advice as well. So today we spend the night with Muhammad ibn Sirin, living with him, reflecting on him, understanding his challenges and seeing how upright and moral he was. He wasn't just a person of knowledge, but when push came to shove and when life came crumbling down, he stood strong and firm and committed to the teachings that he taught his entire life. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all tawfiq and grant us an understanding and allow us to live like these great giants. Wa sallallahu